Thank you, Nick. G'day. How you going? I haven't a clue what he said yet. Nick has been an incredible friend and a great reflection of what conservative leadership is really all about. And as I come here to this great event tonight, this day that we celebrate two words that just go together: Western conservative. That just sounds right, doesn't it? I just like the sound of that phrase, Western conservative. It reminds me of another Western governor about 40 years ago or so that came upon the scene and started a movement that changed this country forever. An individual who understood the importance of the 10th Amendment. A governor who believed in freedom and liberty. He understood when you free people from overtaxation and overregulation that they will flourish. Ronald Reagan gave us hope in America, and it's time for that hope in America again. And it's having seen that transition from the late 1970s. I got out of the Air Force. Those of you who know me, I grew up in a really rural part of Texas. I grew up 16 miles from the closest place that had a post office. To get to Paint Creek, Texas, you went about 60 miles north of Abilene, and then you went another 16 miles to the end of the earth, and that's where I was raised. My mom and dad were tenant farmers. They shared with me the understanding of faith and family, of hard work and patriotism. My dad was a tail gunner on B-17s, flew 35 missions over Nazi-held Germany. Then he came home and he wanted to live in peace. And he raised a family. He knew it was important to pass on to my sister and myself the values that had been passed on to him. Looking back over my extraordinary life, we weren't rich. Well, we were rich. We just weren't rich in monetary and material things. We were rich in family and faith. That little place called Paint Creek. And I went off to school at Texas A&M University, volunteered to serve our country in the United States Air Force, and it was during those travels around the world that I began to see what an incredible country we live in. I saw how people lived in the governments that they were associated with. And I realized that we were so fortunate to live in the greatest country in the world. And that has always been my spark. Knowing that the sacrifices that were made for us, our founding fathers and their vision that they had for this country, it's why I'm so optimistic about the future of this country today. As sure as the sun's going to come up in the east tomorrow, I know America's best days are in front of us. I know that. And I know it because I have seen the American spirit displayed before. I saw it back in the 1980s. You all think about where we were, what was going on. And I know it because if we have a president of the United States that respects the Constitution of this country and respects the Bill of Rights, particularly that 10th Amendment, that the best days of this country is ahead of us. And I want to share with you why I'm so passionate about that. Because I've been engaged for the last 14 years in an extraordinary experiment down in the state of Texas. We believe that if you're freed from overtaxation, overregulation, freed from over-litigation, if you have accountable public schools in place where you've got a real skilled workforce, there is nothing you can't accomplish. Nick shared with you, oh, by the way, Nick, it's not 2 million jobs, it's over 2 million jobs that we were created. As a matter of fact, from the end of 2007, December of 2007 through December of 2014, 1.5 million jobs were created in the state of Texas. The rest of the country collectively lost 400,000 jobs. That is a stunning number to me. Think about that. Without Texas, this country would still be 1.1 million jobs behind where it was in 2007. And the question is, how did that happen? And it happened because we allowed people to keep more of what they work for. We have a tax environment that allows people to keep more of what they work for. We have a regulatory climate that's fair and predictable, a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing. We have accountable public schools that basically translates into a skilled workforce. Listen, when Toyota, North American headquarters of Toyota, decided to leave California and decide where they were going to go in the country, they did their homework. And they were going to a place where there was a skilled workforce, and that's the reason they went to Plano, Texas. There is a reason for these things to happen, to send those messages. I want to share with you 3 things today that I think are really important that you may not know, and why they're important to us. Louis Brandeis was an old Supreme Court justice, and he said that the states are the laboratories of democracy. That states are supposed to experiment with policies and novel ideas and to put those things into place. That from time to time a state will make a mistake, but at least they haven't destroyed the republic. That is such a powerful statement. The Constitution clearly states what the federal government's supposed to do. It enumerates them. The federal government is supposed to stand a strong military. The federal government is supposed to secure the border of this country. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could get them just to do those 2 things? You realize we have the smallest army since June of 1940. We have 1 fighter in production, the F-35. We are down to 10 carriers. We need to have at least 11. I will suggest to you, as Heritage says, we need 13. You think about what's going on in the South China Sea today, and we need to have that strong naval presence there. We need to get this country back on track, and the federal government to respect that Constitution. And then the 10th Amendment, as it says, everything else you states take care of. So we did in Texas. In 2003, we were 27th in the nation in high school graduation rates, which is about the middle of the pack. You figure we became a majority-minority state in about 2000. This is a very large population, somewhere north of 4 million young kids. This is not the easiest group to educate because of the challenges economically, culturally, otherwise that we have in that state. And 27th might have been good enough, but it wasn't for me. It wasn't for the men and women of the Texas legislature. And we started putting accountable public school programs into place. And when I mean about accountable public schools, we had the largest incentive pay package for teachers in America. We expanded charter schools by a substantial amount. We started testing young people, being able to identify when they were having problems early on in their courses, in intervening and getting them back on track. And let me tell you what the result of that was. Last year, Texas was the 2nd highest graduation rates in America. If you were Hispanic, you had the number 1 graduation rates in America. If you were African American, you had number 1 high school graduation rates. And by the way, we did it without the help of Race to the Top, No Child Left Behind, or Common Core. Let these states come up with the novel ideas to implement them. They will compete. Competition is a good thing. Whether you're for the Denver Broncos or if you're for the Dallas Cowboys, competition is good. If you're a governor working with your legislature and the men and women of your state, put that competition into place. 1.5 million jobs created from 2007 through 2014. We added 5.6 million people to the population rolls of Texas during that decade that I was governor, that 14-year period of time, basically. 5.6 million people. You realize what that translates to? A lot of pickup trucks on your roads with non-point source pollution coming out the back of those exhausts, right? 5.6 million people added to that state. Oh, and by the way, there's a huge manufacturing or refining industry down in the state of Texas. And there are emissions that are going in the air, right? That's what the conventional wisdom and the media would tell you is going on down there. Oh, and by the way, they are at a latitude that is really conducive for the production of ozone. What do those three things tell you? That over that decade, over that 14-year period of time, the air has got to be worse in Texas, right? Because you know you can't have job creation and wealth creation and take care of the environment at the same time. It's impossible. It's what the left tells us. Here's the facts. In that period of time, nitrogen oxide levels are down 62.5%. Ozone levels are down 23%. And regardless of where you are in the whole climate change thing, CO2 levels were down 9%. Wasn't that the point? I don't care where you are in this debate. Wasn't that the point? Job creation like it's never been seen in this country. Population increase. And we made the environment better. Wasn't that the goal? You can have job creation and population increase and take care of your environment. We did it by putting incentives in place to get these companies to switch over to cleaner burning fleet engines. We did it by switching over from old, dirty burning power plants to cleaner burning natural gas powered plants. It can be done. What has gone on in the state of Texas is a powerful story. And it can happen anywhere. This isn't because it's Texas. We need a president of the United States that respects that we, in fact, can allow the states to compete, allow the states to come up with these novel ideas of addressing issues. And I'll be real honest with you, I don't care whose ideas they are. I don't care whether it's a Democrat's idea or a Republican's idea. As a matter of fact, a Democrat district judge came to me in the early 2000s. He said, "Governor, we are putting a lot of people in prison for a long time, and we're destroying lives, and they're becoming real criminals. And when they get back out, that's all they know." And he was talking to me about drug courts and the concept of taking these nonviolent drug-related offenses and allowing some flexibility by the judges in the sentencing, whether it was treatment, whether it was giving them shock probation, a whole host of options for a judge to work with. And that made sense to me. You know, it had this huge buildup in prisons in the early 1990s. Ann Richards was the governor of Texas during that period of time. Bill Clinton was the president of the United States. We had this huge prison buildup. And the result was we started seeing a lot of young people's lives being destroyed. And it made sense to me that this could work. And we implemented it in the state of Texas. I think in 2007 is when we put the first efforts into place. And let me tell you what the result is. Last year, 8 years later, 7 years later, in the last 4 years, we shut down 3 prisons. We've saved $2 billion of taxpayer money. That is what you call real conservatism, and that's what you call being smart on crime. And more importantly, we have young people who are having a second chance at life, and we didn't destroy their lives. That's what Republican leadership is doing across this country. We're seeing that happen all across America as governors pick and choose good ideas for their states, but one size will not fit all. If the Supreme Court is listening, that's exactly what I said. One size will not fit all. That's not how this country was set up. This week, as the Supreme Court made decisions that I'll be real honest with you, I didn't agree with at all. I have said from the get-go that these decisions, particularly that decision about traditional marriage, needed to be made in the states. I believe that with all my heart. That is where that needs to be decided. We need a president of the United States. And by the way, the reason this election is so important, because that individual that we choose to be our nominee, and God willing to be the next president of the United States, may choose as many as 3 Supreme Court justices, and it better be somebody that understands we have to have credentialed conservatives on the United States Supreme Court if we're making those appointments. And I know a little something about that because I've appointed 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices in Texas, and we don't do squishy in Texas. Let this country compete again. I am so optimistic about the future of America. If we will free up these states from this one-size-fits-all, you'll see innovation. Yeah, and from time to time, a state's going to foul it up, and they just are. I mean, you think about what Brandeis said about experimentation, and Colorado comes to mind. Yeah. But I defend the right for Colorado to be wrong on that issue. I do. It's their right. We got challenges in this world. I think about what I'm seeing around the world and the pessimism that all too often crops up. Pessimism when we see Christian Coptics being led to a beach in Libya and be beheaded. When we see the 3 attacks just within the last 24 hours and realize that America cannot just stand back as we've done all too often in Libya, in Egypt, in Syria. To see these negotiations going on with Iran and realizing the huge mistake that we're making. The way that our finest friend and best partner in the Middle East, Israel, has been treated by this administration. To realize that Vladimir Putin looks at us and he does not respect the United States because America has not sent clear messages to our adversaries that if you cross that red line, there will be a price to pay. We must have a president who sends the message to our allies that we will be there for you, and if you are our adversary, you cross that red line, there will be hell to pay. I took my father back to his old air base. It was one of 60, 70 kilometers of the air base that I had served at, RAF Mildenhall. My dad was a little further east into East Anglia as a young boy, and it was one of the most powerful trips that I've ever been on, to be with my dad as he walked into these old barracks, into his old combat mess, down the runway that he had taken off with 500-pound bombs slung underneath that aircraft to go defend freedom, to go deliver a continent from fascism. And we went across the English Channel, and he reminded me, he said, "Son, this is my 71st trip across the English Channel." And we went to that beach, Omaha Beach, that cemetery above that beach, where on the 6th of June of 1944, we started that great liberation. And my dad and I standing on that windswept vista, looking at those 9,000 headstones, those white crosses and stars of David, it struck me they all look west. They look west across the Atlantic to America. West across that vast ocean to the country they loved, they gave their life for, that they would never return home to. It was a powerful moment for me to realize that they are lying there in silent judgment today of us, And we must ask the question, have we earned their respect? Were their sacrifices worth it? And I will suggest to you that we have the opportunity over the next 15, 16 months to send a powerful message, not just to them and to their memory, but to the entire world that yes, their sacrifices are worth it. America is the greatest country that this world has ever seen, and that let's work together to make America, America again. God bless you, and thank you all for being conservatives, Western conservatives. Thank you.
Rick Perry, Governor, 4-term, longest serving, Mr. Lone Star, Mr. Deep in the Heart, Mr. Economic Turbocharge. Rick Perry, and now welcome back Byron York, the Washington Cross-Examiner.
I will be to Byron's left, which is a very rare occurrence.
Thank you very much, Governor. I appreciate it. You know, I don't remember you being this demonstrative the last time around in 2012. Does it feel different now?
It's good to be healthy. Some of you may not know, I had major back surgery 6 weeks before I announced in 2011, and any of you that are contemplating, because there's already, 13 or 14 in, so who knows how many more are going to get in this thing, but any of you that are thinking about it, don't have major back surgery.
Okay, that's rule number one for running for president. Let's talk about something you touched briefly on, which is this Supreme Court decision. And
which one?
The gay marriage decision. Rather than not appointing any squishes to the court, is there anything else a president can do? Is there anything else you would be doing as president right now if you were the president and the court did this?
Well, obviously, I think sending the messages about the 10th Amendment is the most important thing that a president can do from my perspective, is that, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've made laws for lots of years as a legislator and as a lieutenant governor, as the governor. And so I understand, and I appointed 9 people to the Texas Supreme Court. And there are a lot of different ways that you send messages that you believe in the Constitution. I think that, here's my challenge with this, the current president, is that if he didn't like what the Congress was doing, he just passed an executive order. And I think we have to get back to truly sending the message that we are people who respect the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and that when, you know, whether you agree with it or not, that we've got to get back to that. And that's the president must be that individual who sends that message on a daily basis. This country wants to be led. I believe that with all my heart. They want a leader that will stand up and say to Congress every day, to the American people every day, here is where we're going. Saddle up.
All right, let's go into another issue. Let's talk a little bit about the economy. And you have probably been, thank you very much, you have probably been the most enthusiastic proponent of American energy, probably of any of the candidates. But at the same time that you've been talking about this, we have seen an energy boom turn into an energy bust, oil approaching $100 a barrel and turning into about half of that. So the question is, yes, American energy independence is a good thing for a lot of reasons, but can that really fix what ails the American economy?
Yes, it can. Let me share with you why. And you're going to have ups and downs. I mean, that's market. And I'm a big believer in markets and free markets and trying to keep them as free as we can. But the fact is, I think the future of America is inextricably intertwined to our energy policy. And I think North American energy policy, not just American domestic energy policy, Canadian, United States, and Mexico. Those 3 countries have more known reserves than Saudi Arabia and Russia. If we were to develop those energy resources, and I'm talking about all of them, all of those energy resources, the result of that is you will drive electricity prices down. And the reason I know this is because we saw that happen in Texas in the mid-2000s, 40% decrease in electricity prices. You couple that with corporate tax policy that lowers the corporate tax rate. We got the highest corporate tax rate in the Western world. Lower that corporate tax rate, And not only that will raise mid-level wages, but it'll also give incentives to manufacturers to come back on shore, and we can have the greatest manufacturing renaissance in America's history. That's what can happen. And we need to use our energy to do that.
Let me ask you one thing that's related to this. Let's talk about immigration for a second. You know, a couple of the candidates, Scott Walker and Rick Santorum, have touched on this idea of the number of immigrants who enter the country every year, not just border security, not just interior security, but actually on the level of immigration in the United States. So I'm going to ask you a question that Gallup has asked for many, many years. It's exactly how they ask it. In your view, should immigration be kept at its present level, increased, or decreased?
Well, here's what must happen. The American people do not trust Washington to deal with immigration. And until the border is secure, Washington, D.C. is going to be inept, and they are not going to be trusted. I know about securing the border. And until that border gets secured, these issues are not going to be addressed. Now, you get the border secure, which I know how to do. I've had direct job experience with it. Then you can have a conversation about, do we have enough workers in this country or not? And I think that's the question that is legitimate to answer. We have an agency, I suggest to you, that is broken. The idea that somebody comes into this country, overstays their visa, and we can't find them is unacceptable.
But the United States gives out about 1 million green cards every year. Legal permanent residence. If you get one, you're here for life. You can become a citizen. Is that too many? Is that enough? There are Republicans who are on either side of that.
Well, I will tell you that I think we need to have a thoughtful process in place. We are a country of immigrants. We understand that having immigrants in this country and having people want to come to this country legally is a good thing, and we need to continue to have that. If we're going to have this manufacturing renaissance that I talk about, we're going to need workers to fill a lot of those jobs. So having a thoughtful immigration policy in place that takes into account we need workers in these areas. You may, this year you may need 500,000. This year you may need 750. This next year you may 1.2 million. I mean, to try to lock it down and say, is 1 million the right number or not? Have an agency that works. Have an agency that actually interfaces with our sectors of the private sector out there that we need to find out whether they need workers or not, and manage it that way. I mean, the idea for someone to stand up and say, we don't need any more workers in this country, versus the Hillary Clinton's idea of just having an open border, somewhere in between there is where hopefully the adult will be.
All right, let me move on, ask you a question about ISIS. Here is President Obama's view of Iraq and what's happening there. He believes there is murderous sectarianism in Iraq, and that for many years a brutal dictator kept a lid on that. And we blew the lid off when we invaded in 2003, and only at great cost in life, and with the aid of 170,000 American troops, did we put this lid back on. Well, now Obama took all the troops out, and the lid is off again. So the question is it worth putting that lid back on? And if it is, what would it take from the United States to do that?
Well, the lid can be put back on. The lid should never have been taken off. The great question that should be asked of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama is, knowing what they know now, would they have withdrawn the troops in 2011? We all know the answer to that. The lid can be put back on, but it is with a coalition of Middle Eastern partners. It is with Jordan, it is with Saudi Arabia, it is with Israel, it is with Turkey, it is with Egypt, putting together a coalition to eliminate ISIS. That can occur. It will require those with our assistance, boots on the ground in that region to do that, but we can. But this idea of this administration is not capable of it. And I don't think they're capable of it because I look at their track record. And the track record has been to take a step back. We had the opportunity to eliminate ISIS when they were first in Syria by our funding of the Syrian rebels. And this president took the step back and said no. Had we delivered lethal weapons to the Peshmerga in northern Iraq, we could have defeated ISIS at that particular point in time, but this president said no. So it is going to require a coalition effort, with the United States being part of that coalition, with boots on the ground, to eliminate ISIS. And at that particular point in time, I think you can put the lid back on it, and you can bring peace to Iraq again.
Let me ask you one thing about defense spending. You talk about the number of aircraft carriers. You talk about just having one fighter plane. Aren't there still incredible inefficiencies in the Pentagon? I believe the services are fighting over that F-35 fighter plane because each one wants their own separate type at the additional cost of billions and billions of dollars. You have TRICARE, this extraordinarily expensive benefits program. So when you hear Republicans say we need to build this up, we need to build that up, don't they still need to cut some spending from the Pentagon?
And one word, yes. And the fact is that if you cannot put the DOD's budget on the table and go through it and thoughtfully make the reductions in acquisitions, in all of those different areas where I'll suggest to you there are some substantial, stupendous dollars that are being spent that don't need to be spent. You need to go in and address this. I don't have a problem with that at all. And bring men and women who have an experience of that. Bring former individuals with deep knowledge of the DOD, of where those inefficiencies are, into an administration and give them the power, empower them to point those out and then hold them up to the American people and say, these are the expenses that are just absolutely unacceptable, and we're going to cut them.
All right.
Let that sun shine on the Department of Defense.
All right. Thank you, Governor. That is all the time we have today.
Thank you, Byron. Well done.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.